was very effective. And so it has, if North Korea's actions in Sony pushed the line a little closer to an actual attack, the U.S. response pushed it back a little bit. That was a good thing. We are still unsure as to what a good response would be. I think some of the discussion so far has talked about the difficulties of deterring North Korea, the difficulties of changing their behavior, of affecting their calculations. One of the discussions during the Sony episode was, what would a proportional response be? The U.S. is very committed to following the precepts of international law. So they were looking for a proportional response. And it's very difficult to understand what a proportional response would be. If you turned off North Korean movie studios, right, most people would be grateful. Right? If you turned off North Korea's electrical grid, people might not notice. Right? So it was difficult to come up with a proportional response. But the threat that there would be some kind of response and the actions that the U.S. took to make it clear that we knew enough that it was North Korea had a positive effect. Right? If the goal, however, of North Korean actions is to go beyond these sort of provocations used to shape negotiation and discussion with this House, or provocations to shape opinion in the U.S., then we should worry. And so one of the questions is, what is North Korea's intent in launching cyber attacks? It could be to go further. At the same time, and what it looks like, at least for now, is that the primary intent of these cyber attacks is symbolic. There has been no physical damage, there have been no casualties, the incidents have been short-lived, right? So it's mainly, I think, a symbolic purpose, a political purpose, in many ways aimed at the domestic audience in North Korea as a way to signal to them resolve and ability to strike back, things that make the regime look stronger. One of the attractions of cyber attack for countries like Iran and North Korea is that for many years they were unable to respond directly against the U.S. They had to simply take whatever it is they got. And now they have the ability to reach out and touch the United States. And I think that's been a powerful psychological benefit for them. But their decisions on when to use this technique are very much shaped by their own internal policies, by the decisions of the Kim regime, and it doesn't look like they're going to do anything particularly wild. We have a reluctance, however, to admit that some problems are undeterrable. North Korea has probably given up, we hope, on its desire for forcible reunification. But they will not be deterred from these provocative acts. It's very difficult to deter cyber attacks, particularly when they don't cause physical damage or casualties. The dilemma here is one of miscalculation. We are talking about a regime that is insular, that has not very deep understanding of certainly American policy. And so the risk is that what could appear to North Korea to be a useful political action using cyber means could be a miscalculation. It could lead to inadvertent escalation. I think it's this issue of North Korean decision-making in when to use these kind of capabilities that is most worrisome. Because there's a risk that North Korea's leadership will decide to take some kind of cyber action, assume they can manage escalation, and be wrong. So I think that's the biggest constraint for us. The addition of cyber capabilities to North Korea's military portfolio does not change the strategic balance on the peninsula, but it does change the ability of the North Koreans to take more assertive actions, more aggressive actions, and this is what we should probably worry about. Did you want to stop there and have questions?
Sure, very good. Now, Betsy, are you going to take questions?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, Joe?
Yep. Thank you. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do question, however, the apparent acquiescence in our failure to to retaliate in some form. You indicated that there's no doubt that we know North Korea did it, and that we could retaliate in some form, but that we have not done so. And that North Korea has been able to make the point with its own people that it successfully reached out and hit the U.S. even though there's no physical damage. Assuming they have successfully made that point, why would we not want to neutralize it or rebut it by taking some action that they know came from the U.S.?
That's a good point. I think one of the big policy disputes now in cybersecurity is how do you get consequences for malicious action? And it's been very difficult for a number of reasons. The first was attribution. We're on a good path towards solving that. The second was this question of proportional response and how you respond in a way that's consistent with international law. That's still very difficult to figure out what is a proportional response. And the third is the reluctance that we heard about in the earlier discussion, the reluctance to do anything that might be seen as by a provocative action by us or destabilizing. But I think one of the things we have to confront is that until we have consequences for these kind of cyber actions, they're going to continue. It doesn't require a military response necessarily. There's something in international law called the law of countermeasures, and that could involve sanctions or other activities, indictments. The discussion you heard about with China was very much a decision to have consequences for Chinese espionage, where it was John Carlin at the Department of Justice who decided that it would be useful to indict PLA officers. We never thought we would get them to trial. They're not going to be standing in some court in the US, but it sent a clear signal. So one of the things we have to do is look for countermeasures. The concern on the part of the administration is, first, can we be sure it was them? Second, can we ensure it's a proportional response? And third, can we ensure that whatever we do does not escalate the conflict? So with those three hurdles, it's been difficult to find an answer, but I think finding some way to have consequences is crucial.
Thank you, Joe. Now the floor is open. Anybody, good question? Identify yourself. Microphone is right there, please.
Peter Humphrey, I'm an intelligence analyst and a former diplomat. Paper at the Korean Economic Institute late last year mentioned that North Korea's hacking capabilities, in fact, located on Chinese soil, which raises the issue of when China says that it can do nothing to control North Korean behavior, that's a lie. Every single time they say that, we've got to say, please shut down the hacking capability on your soil, because North Korea's infrastructure is not that good. And that leads me to suspect that the North Korean hackers and the Chinese hackers are probably doing a little more than renting out space. So I just wanted to say that.
Sure.
Also, if you could just look at radar capabilities in Kwajalein and our over-the-horizon capabilities, it will go to your point that we don't have south-facing.
Don't have south-facing, serve the Gulf of Mexico, right there.
Oh, you mean in the U.S.?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So I have a continuing ongoing dialogue with Chinese officials and U.S. officials on cybersecurity. It's been going on now for about 5 years, and the issue of North Korea has come up repeatedly. And we proposed a tabletop exercise involving a North Korean provocation, and at first the Chinese agreed, and they said no, they couldn't do it, that permission, they have to ask permission, and they were denied permission. And then last year we were able to do it finally, right? It was after Sony. It was really an interesting discussion because what the Chinese said probably won't surprise you, but they said, first of all, you are doing this, you are asking us to help you with the Sony case to disrupt our relations with our closest ally. And our answer was, well, why would we bother? Right? I mean, the impression I got from them, and I've had numerous discussions with Chinese officials on North Korea. I received a couple impressions. The first is they're really irritated with the North. We've sometimes to kid them, we say, well, can't you control your pet? The answer is apparently not. And so they're irritated, and they feel like the North does things, and you've heard this, I'm sure, from all the panelists. The North does things that are provocative that don't really help China out, right? And that strengthen the US position. That said, the Chinese are not interested in engaging in a conflict with North Korea on our behalf, or engaging in a dispute with them on our behalf. They're not interested in doing that. And so they probably know about, if not during the action, at least after the action, North Korean activities based in China. But it's not in their interest to take any action. Right? They have no desire to do that. And in the Sony case, the US explicitly asked China for assistance, and the Chinese declined, saying there wasn't enough evidence to justify the attack. So I don't think we can look to China for help. The Chinese do not appear to be helping the North Koreans improve their cyber attack capabilities on a government-to-government basis. Of course, you have North Koreans in China and in other parts of the world who are able to access the black market for cyber tools. They do have assistance from Iran, and Iran gets some assistance from China. But directly, that doesn't appear to be one of the avenues for improvement. At the same time, the Chinese really don't have any interest in helping us out on this front.
Thank you. Good comments. The floor is open. Please, microphone. Identify yourself.
Hello, my name is Michael Buckaloo. I'm a research intern at the East-West Center. And my question is directed to Mr. Lewis. So based on the recent cyber attacks and hacking in the ROK and US that has been mentioned by the panel, what steps would you recommend for the US and ROK to do to better harden their defenses against cyber attacks? One example for me that comes to mind is that the ROK cybersecurity law actually does require Internet Explorer and DirectX, which are very vulnerable systems to hacking.
So there's a number of things you can do to harden your systems, but perhaps the most important thing is to recognize that you can't keep a determined opponent out of your networks. And so what people need to plan for, and this is, I think, to some extent what the Department of Defense is planning for, is how do I continue to operate, how do I continue to provide services, even while under attack, even when my network has been degraded. And so that's the first thing, is you can do this through exercises. You know, if I turn off the computer, what do I do next? And some of the answers are very basic. For example, you've probably seen recently that military training in the US has gone back to teaching people how to do navigation using astrolabes and other things, to not rely on GPS. That's because GPS may not be reliable in a conflict. The North Koreans have attempted to jam GPS, you all know that, but with mixed success. It may not be permanent, but it might be something they could do initially. So the first question is, how do I continue to operate in a compromised, integrated environment? And that's what you have to plan for. The second thing, of course, as you were pointing out, is there are basic measures that people should take to make their networks a harder target. Right? You don't want to be like Sony, where it's so easy that once you get in, you can trompe around and do whatever you like. And there's a number of places where you can look for these steps. The Australian Signals Directorate has a list of measures you can take to harden your network that are effective against probably 85% of all known threats. NSA has come up, working with DHS, has come up with similar things. So there's things you can do to make it more difficult. And the North Koreans, because they're still at a fairly basic level, that would reduce the risk considerably, but you can't reduce the risk to zero. So you have to say, in a conflict, how do I continue to operate even after I've been compromised?
Thank you. Larry?
Mr. Lewis, I've written for several years and testified before Congress on North Korean, Iranian nuclear and missile collaboration And I was struck by your comment that there seems to be some important collaboration going on between Tehran and Pyongyang in the cyber warfare area. What information or evidence have you seen to indicate that they are cooperating in this area?
Well, usually it's very much similar to the missile and nuclear field, right? So this is the same sort of mechanisms and networks that exist for that are used to have experts travel back and forth. The most compelling hard piece of evidence, other than the visit of delegations, might very well be that the attack tool used against Sony was a modification of the Iranian attack tool used against Aramco. So it could be a fluke, sure, but given the other, in particular the work on the missile and nuclear proliferation and others have done, it seems unlikely that it was a fluke. So there does appear to be a degree of cooperation based on the software North Korea uses, based on the exchange of experts and delegations.
Tom, can you come in?
I was just, I was just curious whether you feel comfortable the level and extent of defense to cyber attack as far as the U.S. government's major installations and agencies are concerned. You mentioned DoD and NSA and so forth. But I think you're right, North Korea would continue to develop their cyber capability, and at some point, they may even want to test how good the defense, anti-cyber defenses are here in this country. So that's my question, but I think notion that North Korea is